Good evening and welcome to Flat Earth United. Joining me this evening is Kyle McDonald. How you doing, Kyle?
Doing great. And yourself?
I'm doing fine and dandy. It's really, really good to have you here. I've been wanting to talk one red paperclip for as long as I've been watching your videos. It's just something I can really, really relate to, having pretty much, I don't want to say done the same thing because I definitely don't own a house, but I've managed to self-sustain from doing something similar. So before we get to that, I want to kick off with the most important question that there is, which is, how did you find out Earth is flat?
You know what? I listened to everyone when you ask this question, answer very eloquently, and they have a very specific thing. I'm trying to think. It was last year. I was watching some videos, and then it. You know what? I don't even know. I don't remember. It was seeing the space pictures being faked is what got me. Seeing through the NASA lies was what got me to say, "Oh wait, if they're faking this, why would they be faking this?" And then everything else after that. That was the main key for me. It wasn't about finding. It was the space pictures, spacewalks in a pool, all of space being a fisheye lensed, and watching the mainstream media always talk about the curvature of the Earth. So they'd say the balloons would go up, and they could see the curve from the balloon, and then you watch the video go up, and there'd be a very specific spot where it would bend over like this, and then it would go flat, and then it would go concave and stuff. But the media was constantly saying you could see the curvature of the Earth. And I knew that so many media outlets were lying about everything through the US presidential campaign last year. And I said, why are they constantly pushing this? It looks like they're pushing a narrative, they're pushing a myth. And yeah, so no specific spot, but it was just sort of watching the lies, watching the deception essentially take place.
But before that, were you aware at any level that there was deception going on at NASA or 9/11, or were you a truther?
I guess like it's one of these things where I never really looked into this stuff. I was just busy doing other things. I really believed the mainstream story of 9/11 until last December, and I just never looked into it. And then someone said, "Hey, look at Building 7 or whatever." And I went and watched it once, and I said, "That's okay. That's nonsense." And everything fell apart. I didn't even get into psyops until like 6 months ago. The idea that people would have a faked event or a fake shooting, I never, ever, ever knew this would happen. This was happening and has been happening for a long time. And I was flat Earth, like 100% full flat Earth before I found out about most of these things, because I was focusing on the geographical aspects of it, and specifically how the media was faking curvature, pushing the NASA lies, and then the perspective. You could see very clearly they were spinning and misdirecting away from actual truth due to perspective. Like it's commonly said that boats go over the horizon. If you zoom in, you'll pull them back, and that's not always true, but they don't go over the horizon, they go into the distance. And nobody in mainstream media or mainstream science was acknowledging the fact that they do go into the distance. They were pushing the over the curve myth. And I really focused on this first, understanding the psychology of deception, of how the geography of where we live could be essentially totally falsified to create a inverted fake model that would indoctrinate people into a scientism version of the Earth. And then everything else after that was quite easy to click together, all the psyops and the lies and the misdirection on other fronts.
It's very topical at the moment because we've got censorship on YouTube based on what a lot of flat earthers will call false flags, hoaxes, and such like. And with flat earth, in my opinion, I don't know, I'm going to raise this as a question, see if you agree with me. I don't think it is being censored. And I don't think it's being censored because it's long established. A lot of the false flags and hoaxes are literally in development as we watch them. So they're not going to want anybody messing around with that while they're being penned, while they're literally writing history. Whereas with flat earth, I think there's no need to censor it. We've got what we call shills are people, regular Joe, who's just indoctrinated with the globe lie, and therefore will fight tooth and nail without any motivation from government or paycheck to do so. But that means that we have, in my humble opinion, the upper hand. There's no power that should not be standing over flat earth saying we must draw a line through these videographers rather than under them. We don't want the advertising revenue anymore. Quite the contrary. You picked apart the Google advertising where they said the Earth is flat? Question mark. You know, you debunked somebody that had basically pointed out that there was a different version of the ad, but ultimately nobody is standing over the guy in that advertising department stopping him from putting that into the advert.
In some cases they may be, but in that specific Google ads, if anyone's not familiar with it, it's a 60-second ad where one of the things is the Earth is flat, and then they put a question mark, and then they say doctors need borders, and then whatever, bad example, but they have different questions. And then it was, in my opinion, misread that the next ad was taken. They took out the Earth is flat from the next ad, and then, but I'm laughing because sometimes it's, in hindsight, these are simple explanations. The one where they took out the Earth is flat, it was the 30-second version of the ad. And I think that's a more reasonable explanation. Yeah, you're right. People are indoctrinated. If you say the Earth is flat, it doesn't even register. People are like, what? That's dumb. Like it's so assumed true. If you walk up to someone on the street and go, yeah, I don't think anyone has ever been to space. They're like, what is this? Like a performance art thing or something? And it's like, they'll go, well, maybe the moon landing wasn't. But if you go, no, like, all of it, it's so far outside the realm of normal discourse that it doesn't even register these actual events that are taking place nowadays. Though these psyops, so the ones we're noticing nowadays, and where people are going, this is a faked event. This is not what we're being told as it's being laid out, as the narratives are being laid out with the conspiracies and the spins and the second shooters and stuff like that. When people talk about those in real time, they're absolutely getting censored, because what the spellcasters want to do is create an event, get people afraid, push an agenda, and then cement it into history. It won't cement into history, into people's brains, if people are calling it out in real time and going, wait a second, this emperor isn't wearing any clothes at all. If you're not able to say that, you can't point that out. If you're just, hey, get out, you can't go on YouTube and say the emperor has no clothes. The emperor is going to walk through and everyone's going to believe that they wear clothes. It's so bizarre. It's just like, it's completely different things. I think psyops in real time are very different than flat Earth historical, like you say, indoctrination versus actual propaganda.
Yeah, we've got systems in place that are already well and truly working with flat Earth, and they're being established when one of these events happens. So yeah, there is no necessity to have anybody watching over and saying, no, you can't say that already, because most, if not all, of the flat Earth arguments have had, like I say, a good few hundred years of people arguing the toss and coming up with debunkings, even if they're not necessarily correct. What did interest me, though, that you said a second ago, was that you kind of alluded to them being exactly like that, i.e. pushing the fake curvature narrative deliberately. And I'm gonna get you to expand on it, because in my mind they're just doing that out of instinct. They're hardwired to think it's there, and therefore when they do their research, everything points towards it. They come up with the footage they need, they present it on TV. Nobody's any the wiser, including the producer. But maybe you think differently. Maybe you think there is somebody standing over us and editing and censoring flat Earth.
I think it's both. I think it's a combination of both, where people, what's a news agency going to do? Like Popular Science, they're not going to go, balloon launch raises questions whether the Earth is flat or not. They're going to just push the agenda that, isn't science wonderful? Since we have this balloon launch and this camera, we can see the curvature of the Earth. I think it's a combination of not wanting to look stupid, and in some cases just going along with programming. But what are you going to do? You're not going to go against, like, this science is a belief. Mainstream science is a belief system. So people are going to work within that belief system. When you bring along any other form of truth, I can't see any of these popular science mainstream media outlets, unless they can spin it, unless they can use someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson or someone to go, well, it turns out we've just discovered this new thing that we were mistaken about this, but this is the new thing. And they're going to direct the narrative somewhere else. And I think that's what they're doing with some new fear porn elements that may or may not exist. I think they're trying to spin people into actual conspiracies. They're trying to spin people into storylines with these psyops and shootings. And I think it's really important to realize that none of this is new. The difference is that we can, in real time now, comment on it and disseminate this information. And this stuff has been going on not only around the world forever, even people in North America or Europe who may not think they've been exposed to this stuff on home soil. They think that these deceptions and psyops happen in war zones, they know that they've happened through history. People know that there's false flags. They know that in war zones there's psychological warfare. What people are starting to realize now though, is that it's here, wherever you are, at all times, and has always been here, but it's never been brought up or exposed as psychological warfare or deception. It's always been exposed. It's assumed that, well, we're different. We've got things right, and it's not something to be paranoid of. It's actually something to smile about it, because it's like, wow, we get to like unravel the greatest mystery that our previous generations of parents and grandfathers probably had no idea they were under these spells, and we get to like turn the tables, shine the mirror back on people, and go, we're not going to just wake you up. We're going to blow your minds, because this truth is way better than any movie, any story. You're not going to believe this, and the next generation after you won't believe that we thought those things were real. It's like a complete 180 on reality. But like any sort of psychological revolution or reformation, there's always the danger that it'll be co-opted and steered in a certain direction. So it's important, I think, to be very level-headed and calm. And I mean, not to patronize you, but you seem very open-minded to pretty much anything. And I think your attitude, I mentioned this on my video today, promoting this. I think your attitude specifically of just being level-headed, seeing all the sides, discussing, is the only way forward. Because if we get paranoid or reacting in any way, that will be directed just as much as being afraid of a shooter who probably didn't exist, or afraid of some sort of element of danger coming down. Because I don't think this is dangerous. I think this is exciting, and in some ways probably really more fun and interesting than most people can even imagine at this point.
Yeah, I think we're also left at a distinct advantage, because as a flat earther, there's a term that everyone in the chat will be familiar with. I may as well bring up the chat while we talk about this. But those of us at the tip of the beak can be considered auto hoaxers. And by that, I mean, when it comes to, let's use NASA as an example, once you see a little bit of deception from NASA, you can throw the baby out with the bathwater. They lose all credibility. Therefore, it's very easy to, before the first frame of a video from NASA, say, yes, fake. There's some form of deception in there. I know it is, without question, before I've even watched the video. And naysayers would say, well, no, you've got to actually look at this NASA footage. And, you know, you roll your eyes and think, well, okay, I can, if you like, look at it and discern where the fakery is for you and point it out to you. But ultimately speaking, for me personally, again, I've turned my back on it. You know, it's, again, in your video before the promo for this show, you were talking about something that I've talked about recently, which is about highlighting deceivers by calling them out. And that's something that I'm very passionate about. It's a double-edged sword what we do. We may attract the wrong person by jumping up and down and going, look, NASA are fake. You know, but at that stage, you are just around the 3-card Monty table making a commotion. And that commotion can draw a crowd, whether or not your commotion or your part of the commotion is to say, don't play the game. But yeah.
It's the 3-card Monty, it's hypnosis, it's leading language, it's these magic tricks. These deceivers are good at what they do. Like, you watch a NASA video or a SpaceX launch and they go, we're launching this rocket into orbit today. It's going to go to this height. It's going to go to this broadcast altitude. It's going to have this much of a report on the rocket. It's going to come back. And then, so they've painted this picture in your imagination of what's going to happen. And then they induce you with imagery. And then you walk away going, wow, I can't believe I witnessed this rocket launch. But what nobody's asking is, hey, this is all a joke. Like, these guys, they're not telling you that it's a joke. That's what's so funny about it to them. I mean, I'll raise his name, and he causes a lot of friction in the flat Earth worlds. But Math Powerland, in his original video where he's on stage, where he's doing a stand-up show, he goes, I want to talk about the joke that's on you, and he points at the audience, and that's what it is. This is a joke by insiders. This is an inside joke that 99% of the population doesn't know could even be a joke and has no idea about. It's like the ultimate inside joke. It's inside baseball. It's inside gamesmanship. And the level of jokery and the level of hoaxery that they're doing is so, it's fascinating. And I think traditionally, anyone who's found out about this stuff would have been sort of illuminated by being brought into these secret societies, usually through a family or some sort of professional or at least contractual military, not just a non-disclosure agreement, but they're going to be brought in by like a blood bond or some sort of, something to make sure that they're not going to spill the beans and let the cat out of the bag on this story. What's happening now is we're looking inside the bag and going, you don't even need to let the cat out of the bag. Like, it's already out. We can see that it's going to get out, and we're flipping the table on it. So what we're doing is we're going, this used to be a joke for all you guys, and now we're taking it and we're going to show it to everyone else. And we're going to point out that you're essentially lying and doing a joke. But what I mean by this is we're going to flood the playing field with this information. But traditionally, anyone who found out about this had, blood bonds or contractual or family obligations to not tell anyone else. They would have been guilted into not speaking up. They would have been fascinated by this information. If you find out about a joke and it's like, shh, don't tell anyone, you're not going to want to. You're going to be like, whoa, what else can we do? Let's have some more fun with this. This is street theater. We can essentially toy with people on a certain level. And while I think most truthers or flat earthers will see that as deceitful and horrible and despicable and all these good words, it's easy to understand under the conditions of you're not allowed to talk about it. So you might do a little internal mental Stockholm syndrome where you go, well, I'm not gonna talk about it, but I kind of want to be part of it now. So you can see it as like a creative endeavor. And that's one of the things that, in order to combat this, instead of just only exposing these deceptions, I think some flat earthers and truthers should start creating deceptions of our own, fooling a bunch of people, and then explaining what we did, showing people how the magic trick works to further let people understand how easy it is to fool people. Not that we should deceive people, but understand that if you're going to be skeptical, don't just be skeptical about Fox News versus CNN. No, be skeptical about anything all the time in a funny way. And don't be afraid to say bullshit. Like, if someone reveals information to you, just be like, well, I don't buy it. And if you think I'm heartless because I think that I'm saying that I don't think anyone died, I don't think anyone shot, I don't think there was even a shooter, that's not being heartless. Being wrong about such a thing, it could be seen as having no soul or having zero empathy. But in reality, auto-hoaxing is better than auto-believing, because auto-belief is where people get fooled. You're essentially being toyed with if you're auto-believing. You can essentially be fooled if you're auto-believing. If you're auto-hoaxing, you're not going to be fooled by anything. You're going to build up your own version of reality. But it's hard. You have to fight off the attacks saying, you're evil, you're heartless. What about the families? What about all the scientists? You're saying it's hard to deal with. I don't have a problem with it. Had never been exposed to this level of trolling and attack, but after a while you realize it's all just people are reacting via their programming. It's not an actual personal attack. They're just lashing out because they want to show that they're morally good people type thing.
I don't think there's a danger that by automatically saying that something's a hoax, you can be put in a position by people who are definitely controlling the narrative to call out something that's potentially real just to make you look awful.
That's I think it's a certain danger. Of course, you could see it as a danger. But look what people are auto-hoaxing. They're not auto-hoaxing real events. They're auto-hoaxing ones where there is evidence or at least a probability that there could be deception. No one's auto-hoaxing that someone's on the side of the road with a flat tire. They're not going, that's not a flat tire. They're just trying to get me to pull over to then rob me. And like, sure, that's probably happened before, but I'll pull over. I'll help someone change their tire. Like, auto-hoaxers are still helping grandmas cross the street. Auto-hoaxers are calling out. And yeah, there's a group rush. When an auto-hoaxer is auto-hoaxing, they're usually following not peer pressure, but peer leading. You won't see auto-hoaxers calling out random things. They're going to call out specific ones and then really pick them apart. There's a really random one in Canada. We had this guy, not in the federal parliament building, but in a provincial parliament building. He came in with a rifle and supposedly shot some people. This was back in the 80s. I went back through the video footage and I said, I don't buy it. Like, this looks fake. I posted that video and it got taken down right away because I think not only had nobody talked about that being a hoax, it was deemed as graphic content, but there was nothing in there other than a guy holding a gun and firing blanks. It was, so what I'm trying to say is the first person who auto hoaxes something, or the first group of people, they can be painted to look stupid. But when a lot of people start to do it and assemble some some evidence, it really leads to there's a bit of safety in numbers, and it's kind of how human psychology works. Okay. Another one that's never really been covered is the Station nightclub fire, the Great White, the band. People talk about the Bataclan, and they're talking about the V-word one that just happened recently. But they're not talking about some of these older ones, which is fine. I don't think we should focus on the past, but I think understanding just how many of these there's been through history, it starts to really change your perception of what tactics will be required to prevent them from happening in the future, and essentially warping our daughters' brains. Like, I don't want my daughter afraid of going to a concert because some guy shot up a crowd that it didn't happen. That's not acceptable for me to have my offspring living in fear of an event that didn't happen, because not only is it crying wolf and actually removing real, true empathy from a real event, it's creating a false sense of fear, and it's actually taking the focus off true fears. Like, if you're standing on the edge of a cliff, don't fall over. Like, we can't live afraid of everything, but there are good fears to have. If it's a cold night and you go out and you can die from exposure, you can put on a jacket, put on some clothes. These are real things to be afraid of. But these social fears, these media fears, these are the ones to walk out for. But as this ties back in, I'm going to tie it back into Flat Earth, because I know this is Flat Earth United. It's something it's not really essentially something to be afraid of. And I know I think a lot of people, when they get into all of this stuff, they get afraid. They get more afraid in these conspiracy truther worlds than they would be if they hadn't known this. I think it's the opposite. I think about the people who are deceiving you. They're the ones who are afraid. When you expose that someone's lying to a large group of people, they're afraid. They're afraid that they're going to be found out. They're afraid that they can be discredited. So in opposition to being personally afraid, I say stand up, stand tall, get people to see what you're seeing. And there's no way we can't win this aspect of the psychological mind war of showing people a better version of reality. I came up with this concept last night, an enemy of the state of mind. And I think that we're like perceptionally treasonous. We are causing treason. We're an enemy of the state of perception. And I think that's what it is. I don't think it really comes down to actual structural reformation and storming the Bastille, which if you actually research, it looks like it was a controlled opposition operation, which sounds insane, but you can storm people's minds. You can storm someone's brain with an idea, and their perception will be able to see through the spell, and that tactic will never work on them ever again. Like, you always hear about the grandparents who get screwed over by an email scam from, my name is Sir Timbuktu, dear Sir Madam, I'm from Africa, I'm in France. Could you please send me some money so I can get out? I'll send you more. Kids aren't getting fooled by this. It's the older generation. So kids aren't going to get fooled by this stuff. They're going to learn about psyops and false flags and stuff, if not in their history classes, through their older brothers and through their buddies at school. And they're going to look at reality and go, wait a second, I don't need to automatically believe what this thing is telling me. Let's actually analyze this, break it apart, take the good, throw away the bad, and move on. And if anyone tries to come at me with an email scam, I'm going to be like, nope, and just delete it. So, bit of a ramble.
You've got a paradigm scam in the case of the heliocentric model, and it is terrifying. That's probably the single greatest feeling of relief that you can get, in my humble view, is that you're not going to get hit by meteors, that you're not, that there's not this infinite vastness above our heads. It's actually extremely limited what's up. I mean, maybe we'll get into discussing some of the models, and infinite plane being one of them. It may be that you can transpose some of those ideas. You can transpose what was infinitely high into infinitely far out. I don't necessarily buy that, because I don't know. Maybe not. It's nice to think about these things, but certainly it's nice to not be terrified. Not that I was particularly terrified, but I kind of was. And if you think about where you are in the heliocentric model, that makes you feel quite insignificant. You do feel like a speck of nothing. It makes you, that's the word I'm looking for, it makes you nihilistic.
I agree. I agree that the whole being seeing this doesn't really matter, it's not a big deal. And I have to say, though, in the same way that you say you weren't really afraid As much as we're a small speck of dust in this infinite universe and we don't really mean anything, I always took that to mean, and I understand the kind of contemporary flat earther view that it's better to not have that mentality. And but I always took it to mean, wow, this thing that I'm worrying about right now, whether my car is going to get towed or whether or not I'll get this second date with a girl or whatever I was worrying about at the time. If I thought about those things, I put it in perspective and said, oh, it doesn't really mean much. So it's not like, it's almost like a de-dramification of the false things that people often are dramatic about. And I can see how that goes both ways. But the whole fear thing is amazing, because if you throw away nuclear weapons, and if you throw away these asteroids, and if you throw away so many of the things that are used to control people through eternal fear, essentially, not only are there less things to be afraid of, the tactics that those people are using to control you won't work. You can't be directed the same way. And that opens you up to a whole new paradigm of inductively observing the world and getting, I think, getting actual truths, not through YouTube videos or hearsay, but actual truth through observing stuff. And this happened last week. I was in rural Canada on a farm, and I was staring up at the moon, and I did this test. I went sort of behind the tree. Here's a perfect prop for a tree. So if that light behind me was the moon, right back there, and the tree was here, I put my hand here behind the tree, and then I moved it out into the moonlight. And you can feel, if you go into moonlight under the right conditions, you can feel a cool energy coming from it. And it could be some sort of electromagnetic, electrostatic energy that only happens in moonlight. But it was very distinct between where the moon shadow was and the moonlight. And this is, people talk about moonlight cooling, and I don't think it works under all conditions. It was in the moon, it had been full, and it was at about 80% waning, I guess. And it was about 10 degrees, 11 degrees Celsius, so about 50 Fahrenheit. There was no wind. It was perfectly silent, and I could feel something I was standing on, or it could have been the ground material that I was standing on reacting with this as well. But not only that, not only feeling a cooling moonlight, I could hear the moon. There's a sound that the moon makes. And so if you're working from North Korea has nukes, there are space stations going around, heliocentrism, the very idea that the moon could have an energy from it, a cooling energy, and a sound would never enter your brain. So under that paradigm where you're in a position to actually feel and observe these things, you wouldn't, because your brain will never allow it to happen. That it will think that, wow, the moon's so far away, and there's buggy tracks up there, and Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and all these guys went to the moon, and only America, and it was a different era back then. I wish we still had these Cold War rockets and rivalry. Like it's like, no, like the moon has a cooling energy. Why? And then second to that, like, what are we going to do about it? Like, if I want to find out, I want to know what that is. And if people on the face of this earth currently, flat earther, ball earther, heliocentric, geocentric, whatever, know about that, have that information, and they're hiding it on purpose, that's what I want to expose. These are these like eternal truths that people have probably known forever. And I think when you get to the tip of the pyramid, the tip of that beak, in these secret societies, that's their secret information. This is the real mystery schools. I think they know. But as much as people know about many of these things, there's also the aspect that I think a lot of people don't know about any of it. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. It's a mystery. But what people do is they create a very good narrative and a very good story that sells well. So it's a combination of both. I think people know about some of this stuff, and I think some of it is just pure mystery, but it's better to provide an answer than to say, I don't know.
Yeah, but again, my concern when you talk about people like the mystery schools or NASA is that, back to credibility, if they've deceived you, certainly if their main purpose is to hold up a deception, then even if they do know, you could never trust them. So short of, you're not going to put them on a rack and torture the truth out of them. That's never going to happen. So you can't really appeal to that authority. Well, you can, of course, but I just wouldn't.
Well, I don't think it's like, I don't think we really need to stop them. It's just understanding what's happening. Like if you're in an Italian street and you're walking along and there's some guy's got a table set up and there's dudes in leather jackets looking around all sketchy like this, and there's cards on a table, you can be pretty much assured that that's a scam. So when some astronaut sophist comes along with his leather jacket and his thing, and they're doing the like double horn ceremonies before the launch, like I'll point at it and go, this is bullshit. Like, you can believe it, but I'm going to expose these people for what they're actually doing, and then move on, because you can't stop people from doing this. Freedom of expression, freedom of speech, it's going to carry on, but the people who see through it, I think, are going to become far more numerous than currently. The idea that literally billions of people won't understand these deceptions is completely irrational to me. Everyone's going to figure this stuff out eventually.
Yeah, well, we have freedom of discernment. It's just many people don't have it. That's the problem. And it's not for, I think everybody's pretty much equal in their ability to do it. It's just the brainwashing is that good. I have a lot of admiration for the heliocentric deception. I think it's very clever. You know, the fact that even back to the shills aspect of it, the fact that we can be in, you know, you and I can be of the mindset that there's somebody nefarious being paid to shut us up, and really it's just another fellow human being that wants to disagree, but we can be of that mindset. That's a testament to how good the programming is, how well we've been brainwashed. It is pretty cool, you know, and looking at it, dissecting it, examining it is equally as fascinating as the fact that the Earth is flat. You know, the fact that we have a completely different world around us than we've been presented with on the TV screen, I might add, is ultimately the most fascinating thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. But then you turn around and look behind you and go, well, how have we got to this point? Well, through this deception. Well, how does that work? That's pretty cool. You know, a lot of flat earthers will shy away from this. I mean, before you join the behind the scenes feed, I was explaining to the audience about banning trolls, and many of them may actually be on their journey to flat earth happiness. I just don't know. Most of them are pretty miserable and angry, and I know that I'm not, and many of the flat earthers echo my feelings in this regard. So you think, well, if you ban them, this is going to be a bit lengthy, but I'll give you another example. There was a car video that was talking about hatred. You know, it's the same across any community in YouTube. It's not just flat earth. Many people get this. And he was essentially saying that if somebody came up to you at a car meet and started saying, oh, you've got a really cool whiz banger there, in other words, you come up with this nonsense term and look stupid, you've got, as the car guy, the enthusiast, or in the example for us, the flat earther, you've got two options. You can ridicule that person and point out how idiotic they are, or embrace them and, you know, give them a bit of support, and hopefully they'll, you know, understand or see things from your point of view or examine more. The only downside is we're pre-programmed to ridicule the idea. We hear those two words, flat earth, and go, instinctively go, no, it's already been figured out. You can't have that view. You know, no need for shills, no need for government paid agents, no need for censorship. You know, most of my videos on flat earth are still monetized. You know, a handful that have been hit by the, whatever they call it, apocalypse. But most of them, I'm monetizing the hell out of them. And why not? You know, it's people in my super chat donating to me as we do this show. So it's not like I'm being censored whilst saying the earth is flat. Now, I'm not for 1 second suggesting that that means it's a psyop and we're being co-opted. Far from it. You know, it just means that this is where I'm leading this, a system, a well-established system, you know, and the deception within the hoaxes, they're not established. You know, they need to control those tightly and carefully. We don't need that control, or I don't think we need that control. You know, we can happily push this idea. We only have to battle against the existing program from the system that's already, I feel, crumbling. Well, I'll lead it into a question. Do you think that the heliocentric system is in any way failing?
Yeah, because like I got a request from Wikipedia today, a direct message from Jimmy Wales. It's important. Your voice is important to us, and they're encouraging me to donate money and to support Wikipedia. Now, Wikipedia has tons of good information, but it is a frontline, A-class, top-tier gatekeeper. If in years past I've sent them $5 or $10, I'm not sending them a cent, because they're actively narrative controlling all of these hoaxes and psyops. If you go look at school shootings in the US, the data, they're going with the mainstream story. They're not actually critiquing any of this stuff, and they lock these things down. So yes, it is going to start failing faster and faster, because I'm not going to not only give them money, I'm going to create content that directly contradicts what their gatekeeping tactics are saying. Not to prove a point, but just to, it's changing. I think, hang on a sec, this cat's going crazy.
It's entertaining watching your cat jumping all over the place.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like this. People have always viewed the world differently. This idea that science can provide the real narrative, I think, is going to fail quickly, and people will fall into their own different camps. And you see this within Flat Earth. You see people that believe in an ice wall. You see people that believe in a Pac-Man model. They believe in a larger globe. Some people believe it's a sphere, but it operates as a flat surface. That some people believe there's a dome. Some people believe people believe in all these things. But we're actually exploring, and we're looking for evidence to sort of support, not our claim, but support the idea that we're not on an actual spinning ball. So once you start getting to the idea where, okay, it's okay to question the normal narrative, there's all these other ones that are going to sprout up like mushrooms. And I think it will be more acceptable to have a unique, even personal view of how the universe and the world works in the future. And it's going to get further cemented into society's brains through augmented reality and things like this. This technology is coming. It's not going to be, I mean, think about this. I walk down the street all the time wearing these. You see people talking into their headphones, carrying phones. It's not out of the ordinary. 30 years ago, if you did that, you look like a lunatic. Maybe you're listening to a Walkman or whatever, but the next generation of kids is going to have elements of, transhumanism, maybe, but more just augmented reality, where I can see a video feed in here while I'm walking. Those video feeds and these different sort of personal versions of reality are going to be reinforced by augmented reality. So it's a bizarre mixture of, on one hand, open to new programming, which could manipulate brains, but also creativity. So you could design a building, and you could put it in sort of like Google SketchUp, and then you could put it in a street, and you could send it to your friend. And when they walk down the street, they see the building that you see. And maybe it has a smiley face on it. So it's almost like shared imagination. And I think once this goes to a technological level where everyone can share this stuff, it'll be totally acceptable to have different views of the way the world works. This homogenous mainstream perception that we've been, I think, for the last few generations, specifically since NASA and the space agencies, I won't even get into the religious side of it, but they've created a religion, a de facto one world view of how we view the world. And I think that those days are over, and it's going to get a lot more interesting from here out. The creativity that people are going to bring forward to not only questioning the landscape and the model, but also making it sort of a micro interpretation that it's somewhat private, I think is really it's quite fantastic. I think it's a good hearkening back to things that we always had when we lived in a small corner of the world and we didn't have any media and we only had our neighbors. They say that they started the space stuff in Europe because Americans thought that space travel was fantasy. Now the common read, this is back in the 30s and 40s, 50s, they were trying to sell space travel to Americans and they just didn't buy it. Now the common read on this would be, especially from a Canadian perception, would be like, oh, Americans are stupid. They wouldn't believe anything if you told it to them. And I totally disagree. I think Americans saw through people trying to lie to them. And in Europe, with the more balkanization of languages, it was easier to kind of sell a certain nation on these sort of space myths as a reality. And Americans didn't actually really buy into it until you brought in the experts, the Germans, who sold people on it to sell them on that one world view, precluding the essentially NASA JPL takeover of the American worldview in the 50s, 60s, 70s. I think Americans had a much more this is just blanket statement, people all over the world, but Americans specifically at that time had a greater sense of personal imagination to how the way the world worked. And I think we're going to see again, those days are going to come back, and we're going to look back as this era as a quaint era, and the end of the line will be people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and the ISS and all this stuff. It'll be seen as a silly stage play that happened and fooled generations.
I think you got the two words you used most often in that were belief and reality. And those are the two things that have been hijacked. And when you talk about reality, often people will be describing what is theory and conjecture and not reality at all. They are essentially beliefs. And people don't understand what is beliefs. You listed them off. You know, people want to believe there's an ice wall. It's like, yeah, good for you. You know, it doesn't really mean much. And the same goes for reality. And I'm going to check you on this. You're probably not going to like me for doing this, but tough. You said augmented. And I know what you mean when you use that word. You mean that in the case of a phone, you could literally hold up your phone and what was on the screen would have another layer, you know, on top of it with a different world. You know, it might tell you what's in the shop that you're looking at through the camera lens. That's what you mean by augmented. But I would say that we already have an augmented reality. What we have, instead of it being on a phone screen and portable and walked around and you know, rendered in 3D real time, we have the television set. That is our augmented reality. You know, what is presented on that 2D gobble box is ultimately a bullshit narrative from the news or a bullshit reality in terms of what they tell us the bigger picture is when we look at our world, because we can't. You know, it's back to Math Powerland and his exceptionally good point when he was in front of the audience. He's essentially pointing them to the blue marble pincher and saying, how the F would you know what it looks like? And that's the bottom line here. You don't. You just think you do. You just believe that you do. You believe you know what Earth looks like. And when I get into tete-a-tetes with people like Mr. Grimm, a great videographer, he's putting out some great material, exceptionally knowledgeable. But when it comes to his belief in the Earth, there's no getting around the fact that he has to, like most of the intellectually honest detractors in the flat Earth community, accept that NASA aren't credible. You know, and that's what we've got. That's our proof. These bullshit pictures, and they're no good to anybody. You know, they aren't real. That's not where we live. Now, does that mean that I can discount based solely on that we don't live on a sphere? Well, no, that would definitely be a non sequitur conclusion. You know, at the opening of the show, it kind of sounded like I know there's far more to it for you and me and everybody else when you say, well, I saw that NASA were faking the curve and there's obviously lots of fisheye lens fakery, therefore the Earth is flat. No, there's far more to it than that. But ultimately speaking, you can check out a lot of what's on the TV, what NASA present as completely, well, incredible.
I've been there. I've done it. I've worked on TV shows. I've been a subject where we've purposely fooled people to just for dramatic effect. And like everything I did with the One Red Paperclip story was 100% truthful. Every single thing with that story. But then after the story, they would talk about different elements of it. And I wound up on a TV show in Japan while the Paperclips thing was still happening. It was in May of 2006. And they pretended to the audience there, the studio audience, they had myself and my girlfriend on a video feed to the audience. And they pretended to the audience in that TV show studio that we were back in Canada, and they had like a pennant on the wall and like a baseball glove and like whatever. It looked like I was dressed like this. So it looked like America. It looked like Canada. And they're like, oh, hey, well, welcome to the show. And we're very happy. Maybe you should come to Japan sometime. And they, ha ha ha. And I said, well, I'd love to come to Japan. And they said, well, why don't you come right now? And I said, right now? Okay. And the audience laughed, and I walked off screen, and then it cut to a large shot of the audience where myself and my girlfriend walked out from behind the stage, and the audience was like, oh, and then it cut to a commercial. But it's about fooling, this trickery, these magic tricks, these perception deceptions are what it's all about. And TV is all about this. If you actually, and that's what's so fascinating for me about YouTube, it's so much better than TV because it's individual perspective and ideas versus canned reality and canned deceptions that sell well. I'm much more interested in like a video with one view where the person has a very interesting thing to say than an incredibly well shot chase scene in a movie that with fake explosions and like the street. I mean, I know I've been to so many of these cities. I'm watching it and I'm going, if you turned right there, it would go down the hill, not up the hill. And it's I know it's fun to just lose your reality and have a suspension of disbelief to follow the story, but when you see through the deceptions, they don't work anymore.
Give me a really nice segue there into One Red Paperclip. So I said at the beginning of the show we'd get into it. I thought we'd get into it much sooner, but a good chunk of flat Earth. I love that. So brilliant. But can we talk a little bit about One Red Paperclip? So obviously the story is going to involve one red paperclip. So start there. You've got one red paperclip. What did you do with your one red paperclip?
This is a patch of the paperclip, but it was this size. It was just a regular little red paperclip, and I was about like half a mile from where I am right now. It was in East Vancouver. I took the paperclip, posted it on Craigslist in the barter section, and said, "Does anybody want to trade a paperclip for something bigger than a paperclip?" And then later that night, 2 girls called and said, "Yeah, let's meet up in the parking lot of a 7-Eleven." So we meet in the parking lot of a 7-Eleven. I trade a paperclip for a pen shaped like a fish. And then later that day, I traded it for a doorknob. I traded the doorknob for a camping stove, traded the camping stove for an electric generator. I won't go through all the trades because it really gets complicated and diverts. But if you want to watch the full story, go to TEDx Vienna.
Please do.
You want the whole story?
Yeah, oh, definitely. I want it. I want every single trade because
okay.
I know the list. But
okay, if anybody wants the visuals, go to the TEDx Vienna video, and I go through it all. It's got like 3 million views on it now. So anyways, I got up to the camping stove. I traded that for I traded the camping stove for a generator and a case of a beer keg and I'm totally mishmashing here. So I wound up with an electric generator after I traded the camp stove for it. I traded the generator for a beer keg and a neon Budweiser sign. I traded. I can't. I usually have visuals with me. I traded that for a snowmobile. This guy's worst snowmobile. Traded the snowmobile for a trip for 2 to Yak, BC. All expenses paid trip for 2 to the Canadian Rockies. Traded that for a giant box truck cube van. Traded the cube van for a recording contract. Recording contract went for a year of rent in Phoenix in a house. I traded a year of rent for an afternoon with Alice Cooper. An afternoon with Alice Cooper for a Kiss snow globe. This like little snow globe thing. Which people thought it was crazy, but that was the one time that I had another trade lined up off the back of it, and that was with Corbin Burnson, a Hollywood guy who was filming a movie, and I traded my Kiss snow globe for a role in a Hollywood film, and Corbin collects snow globes, so for him, this wasn't just any regular snow globe, this was the Kiss snow globe, and I traded the role in a Hollywood film in the movie that Corbin was making for a house in Kipling, Saskatchewan, Canada. And the house in Kipling, the town of Kipling owned it. And we moved into the house, had a housewarming party, and the town held a live auditions for the role in the film. The guy who won the role in the film was 19 years old, had just graduated from high school and was working for minimum wage at the Bottle Depot. And then 3 months later, he's down in LA with Corbin working on this movie. The media was focused on the story because it was a series. It was a year long, and every 12 every month or so 12 times during that year, there was a trade, and it turned into an event, and it just slot in at the end of the news hour where it was like, cat stuck in a tree, got saved, and then the paperclip guy makes another trade. It was one of these feel-good stories, and it really propelled people. It caught into the collective imagination, and it was amazing. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And everything, I bet my life on it. When people say, "Oh, yeah, the Earth's flat," and sure people didn't get shot there. Oh, the paperclip thing's fake too. And I just stare them right in the face and go, everything was in that story was true. Talk to anyone involved, and I bet my life on it. And it's very different than when you see this reasoning when people go, "Oh, well, if that's fake, well then your thing must be fake." It's like, no. And I dare you to find 1 ounce of like fakery in there. And it's like, no one will, of course, but like. That's the conviction, and that sense of conviction that I feel. You see it when people are duping; they don't have that sense of conviction. And trade your paper clips. I wrote a book about it. Really good book. You can find it all over the internet. But what a story! That story was so fun to do. It was a project in real time. But then I wrote this book, and it got translated, and then I started getting invited to speak in front of crowds, and man, it just carried on. Like I travel all over speaking about this. And at the time, it's like, what do you mean write a book and speak about this? I was just going and making trades and having a fun personal experience. I didn't own a house, and I wanted to own a house. It was very pure. It was like, I want to have a house one day. And that's the way it happened.
Gotta say, bravo. Because
thanks,
absolutely, that to me is one of the best stories ever. Just fantastic.
It sounds like it was made up. That's the craziest thing. And then when I meet people, sometimes they'll go, "Oh, hey, what's your name?" And I'm like, "Oh, Kyle, and what do you do?" And they pull it out of me that I did the paperclip thing. Like, I never go around going, "Hey, do you know who I am? I'm the paperclip guy. You better recognize."
When
they pull it out, and I go, yeah, I did this thing, and they go, "I've heard about that. Well, that was real." And I'm like, "Yeah."
The bit that gets me is the Kiss snow globe, because when you see that in the list, you know, you're getting up to some pretty bulky stuff by then, you know, physically quite large and weighty, you know, snowmobiles and trucks and things. Then you get this snow globe and you're like, you look at it and you go, what the, you know, I know Kiss stuff is, the memorabilia stuff, it gets pretty wild, but I looked at the picture of it and I was like, it's plastic and what? Why is that at this end of the list? What's going on there? But like you say, it ended up being the, you know, that one must-have thing for a guy producing a movie, and without it, you wouldn't be in the house you're in.
Yeah, and then he spun that whole thing that he traded for the Kiss snow globe into, wait a second, you're collecting snow globes? And he's like, yeah, I'm collecting snow globes. I have the most on Earth, and I want more. And I even put it in the book. You can send Corbin Bernsen snow globes. He's received hundreds of snow globes, people just sending them to him. So it became a thing where trading for that one snow globe, he's accumulated like 7,000 or 8,000 of these things now. It's fascinating and bizarre / creepy at the same time. It's equal amounts of both. He's a really cool guy. Everyone I traded with was awesome. The whole experience was almost universally positive, 100%. It's very different playing around in this like much more tumultuous world of flat Earth, and really challenging people's beliefs versus going, here's something fun you can be part of. Let's go have a party for a year kind of thing.
Yeah. I also saw, for any of the Brits watching, you were on Richard and Judy, were you not?
Yeah, that was so bizarre. I was on Richard and Judy, and then, I mean, I met people in the UK that I'd heard about in other books and read about, and I just went to dinner with them and met them and did all these things, and I was just like, this is so weird. Like, you can access these worlds. It's not like you're prevented from going into them. And I'm on Richard and Judy, and people like have heard about these guys, and it was just this, I mean, a pretty campy little interview. And we went out to the streets and in Piccadilly Circus, and I traded from an umbrella up to, I don't even remember. I don't even remember what I did. It was this, and I think the producer of that clip said, "Well, just fake a few trades and then we'll go back home." And I'm like, I'm not gonna fake trades. Like, I'm gonna trade with people. Like, the TV network wanted me to fake it, essentially. That was very bizarre.
Yeah, whatever gets the point across in the shortest amount of time, with the least amount of production money spent.
Yeah, well, and like talk about like blood rituals and like things that you hear about in the mainstream media. I wound up at one point on stage with Alice Cooper, and I traded him this giant red paperclip. You can find the video if you go red paperclip Alice Cooper. But I traded him a giant red paperclip, and then he traded me a giant weather balloon, and then he came and popped the weather balloon, and it was full of like blood. And then he started thinking about, and everyone I tell that story to in an audience of 500 people has a visceral reaction, like, blood, gross. And I heard Alice Cooper talking about how when people come to his show, in the first 5 rows, they'll get sprayed with blood, and you can see people genuinely afraid. And you start taking that event, that blood being sprayed all over the crowd, and go, wait a second, in the context of magic tricks and stuff, like maybe what's going on there. So I don't want to ruin Alice Cooper's magic trick, but maybe consider that it might not be the type of blood your brain is initially thinking. That's the power of magic. He's a magician. He's a performer and entertainer, and he's been doing this for decades. And watching someone at work like essentially orchestrate a crowd for 3 hours from behind the scenes. It was like Wayne's World. I was like on Wayne's World, the movie, like hanging out with the guy that it was being in Wayne's World. It was like Forrest Gump in reverse. It was like being part of these worlds, that whole red paperclip story. So just when someone says something and you have a reaction, you might be being fooled for certain ways. But
well, my introduction, just to round out the one red paperclip bit. So the first one, or it might have been the first video I watched from you, was off the back of IPS, and he pointed out that you were doing a bit of activism using what you have in the UK is called Free Cycle, whereas you have the free pages on Craigslist, and you essentially had put up a giveaway Can you tell us a little bit about that? If you know which, you've done a lot of videos, so you might not know. If you need a bit more hints, just tell me.
I remember the exact one. I remember your comment. You're like, this is. I think you used the word brilliant. You may have used the word brilliant, but I think you guys have Gumtree as well in the UK. I'm not sure if that's another one, but yeah, free section. I just posted a book. I posted a book that said, you know what? I didn't post the book. The one that you commented on. I posted this dresser, this like chest of drawers or something like that. I painted it on the side of it. What did I say? Flat Earth is real. And then I put it out in the street, and then I took a picture of this dresser painted with Flat Earth is real on the side and posted it in the free section of Craigslist in Vancouver. And the free section of Craigslist in Vancouver sent me back all these responses. Yeah, right, buddy. And like some angry responses. It got taken down for spam. I put it up again. And an hour later, that dresser was gone. Someone came and grabbed it. So probably, I'm not exaggerating when I say this, and I actually have an incredible, I'm focused on the free section of Craigslist in a way that I won't get into right now, but it's really high, incredibly high level. I bet 2,000 people saw that listing that said Flat Earth is real in an hour. And it's one of these ways that you can very subliminally flat smack people, and you can get the information out. And another thing that I did here in Vancouver was the Chris Hadfield on the sidewalk thing, where Chris Hadfield was in the Orpheum Theater, which is a big theater. And I went to the sidewalk before his presentation and just put up a ladder with some signs on it that said, Chris Hadfield is lying to you. Spacewalks are filmed in a pool. It's all just a magic trick. And just stood there and spray painted over my painting of the Moon Man with fake AF, and just filmed the entire thing. People coming up, talking to me. And I just stood there and talked to people for about an hour. Most of the reactions were completely like, yeah, right, this is crazy. But about 40% of the people were really open-minded. Like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean it's a magic trick? It's like, oh, really? I've never heard about this. And one guy got really triggered, really upset, and he went and ripped down the sign and rode off on his bike. But I mean, interacting with people on the streets is very different, and I'd like to do more of it. The reason I haven't is just because I've been focusing on baby stuff on all the nice days that I can get out there. But I think if you stand your ground and you're calm and you act normal and you say like, no, it looks like it's all fake. The way that people won't get triggered and angry. They'll go, wait a second. This person seems calm, measured. It looks like they're either, wait, is this a trick? Am I getting punked? Or maybe they do have something. So if you were to hand people a brochure or a flyer or some literature that they could take home and look at, I think we could get through very easily on a very high level, high order to people outside the echo chamber of online flat Earth. So I know IPS is really big on activism and creating things. And one of the goals of FEMA camp coming up in Denver in 2 weeks will be to create brochures and things like this to actually physically hand out to people. Because I think once you see the information presented in a way that is pretty reasonable, a lot of this stuff is self-evident, and it's more just like, oh, whoa, we've all been fooled for a long time.
Right. I mean, one of the things I do want to plug before we round out the main show is your channel and some of the things that you've been doing on your main channel, because you don't seem to get censored, and you are talking about some pretty controversial stuff on your channel. So is there a trick to that?
No, I got a copyright strike. I don't think I can live stream on there right now. I don't talk about it. I don't like to draw attention to it, but I think I have 2 or 3 channels going. I've had 3 or 4 strikes in total, about 4 videos. I've had videos taken down, but not strikes given, where I think they gave me a strike, but then they pulled the strike back, but the video stays down. So I'm not that I'm nervous of doing these things. I think it's more important to get the ideas out there, save the videos, create torrents, load them to multiple sites. And if they only get 50 views or 100 views ever, that's fine. It's better that the information's out there than holding yourself back. On people's mainline channel, it might not be the best place to do that if your goal is to get more information out to a larger audience. So what you could do is you could point a link to go here. You can get the torrent here, download the video directly. And I understand where it's a trade-off between mainstreaming, mainlining the information on a larger channel with more subs versus the obscure stuff. And I encourage anyone who has anything really obscure, really out there, potentially revelatory, just to record it and get it out, email it to people. I mentioned torrents again. I don't think that I'm guilty as well, but I don't think Flat Earth is taking advantage of the fact that you can get around censorship through torrents or through blockchain networks. And one thing that, what's it called? BitChute is, I think it automatically, if you set up BitChute to your main channel or to any channel, it will automatically repeat via, it'll syndicate through BitChute, but it'll automatically save those videos. I actually hadn't saved the video of Denis Lortie where it was, I think it might be a hoax, I'm not so sure, where he apparently shot up the provincial parliament building in Quebec in the 80s. That was taken down. I didn't have the video anymore, but I went to BitChute and it was still there. So it's a certain safeguard. And I guess if you have a video that might be a little bit edgy or whatever that you think might be censored, find a way to get it out no matter what. And that's my main thing. I think Crow 777 is at the absolute front of this right now. And he's causing a wake of people's videos getting taken down. And there's you know, PK and guys like this have gone through this already, but Crow's standing up and he's saying, I don't give a damn. I'm going to get the information out. And if I have to do it on my own server, my own network, so be it. But what we can do on the backside of that is, with permission, of course, take that information, those videos, those audio files, and throw them into videos up on YouTube. Because YouTube, while it's good to sort of snuff out the beast, I think it's important to get the information out there. I would have never found Crow if it wasn't for YouTube. So anything that we can do on side channels, back channels, new logins, if you need to, get an IP, a VPN type situation and upload things through to a very obscure channel and just link to it. I mean, if they start pulling down things for links, that's a whole other level, but it looks like there's BitChute and a lot of blockchain enabled censorship, much more resistant to Big Daddy YouTube. So it's a fine line though, because if you just push, you take your finger and you poke it right in the eye of the beast, it's going to shut you down quickly. So there's a bit of a nuance and dance that has to take place, but get the info out. That's my main thing.
Yeah, I saw Crow talking to ODD today, and he was again focusing on reality and saying, you know, the things that we should be using to track time, the thing that actually dictates what's going on in terms of time, we don't use. You know, we use time.
It's like right out there.
Shining thing in the sky that we generally ignore and pay attention to what a shiny, spiky disc on a weatherman's screen says instead. But yeah, one last subject that I do want to cover again. Sorry, I've said this. We're going to round out, but yeah, just one more thing, which was about iconoclasm and how you address Dell in this regard. So you recently were, I don't know how recently, maybe it wasn't that recent, but you were addressing Dell and his presentation style. And it's something that you were kind of echoing sentiments of IPS when he was talking about Patricia Steer in terms of how we can present this information to people in a better way. And off the back of that, maybe you can talk about your recent interview. I know you got a tweet and joined. Well, I won't lead you too much. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Which recent interview? That's I'm.
Oh right, is there more than one?
Well, the one on the radio network.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, no. In terms of iconoclasm, it's one of these things where if someone puts up information in a way that can be ridiculed and you can have fun and jest with, I say go for it all the time, and you have to have fun with these things. I've made some points about Dell. I like the guy. I think he's really good. What really confused me with him was when he started attacking IPS for coming out of nowhere and who are you to say these things? And I'm like, what? This guy's good. He's got good information. The attitude of questioning someone where they came from, drifting into paranoia, I was just calling that out. I absolutely love his street interviews, and I was making the real point, and this reversely hits close to home because my name is Kyle MacDonald. It's a very Scottish name, and you've got a guy in Scotland who he has a very thick accent. Most people in North America won't easily understand his accent. It's not a question on the guy and his tactics. In pure legibility, mental legibility, he isn't the best guy to get these ideas out there, and that's just an obvious statement. This is like someone speaking with a quiet voice in a loud room. People won't hear them, and that's I don't really think that's arguable. It's not a question on anything with any of his ideas or any of his presentation style or anything. I think that's just an unfortunate fact of the matter linguistically, and I'm not going to try and tell the guy speak more clear, any of that stuff. Live your own life, live the way you want. But I think that's a legitimate observation on the guy. The whole devolving into camps is an interesting thing. People are like fans of this guy or that guy. I say I'm fans with everyone, and until someone actually directly hits me wrong in terms of drama, I'm pretty much on board. With the iconoclasm aspect of it, though, I think it's good. It's healthy to be iconoclastic and not to build anyone up too big in your brain as the end all be all. I think constantly ripping on people in a jestful manner is a good way to keep people in check and good way to prevent egos from building. I've been very focused on mimetic iconoclasm and taking things that people hold holy and just essentially like putting a beak on it or something stupid. And if this beak, this Pepe patch triggers people, then good. The whole point is this is a silly thing. This is based off of Pepe the Frog. I don't know, but I believe it was Hoosier Flatty put this beak on. It was done in like MS Paint, and it arose out of nowhere. This thing now became a de facto symbol that people hate. There's people in Flat Earth that are like, this is wrong, this is bad. And I don't really care. It's just a silly penguin. The fact that people are reacting to it so viscerally in either positive or negative ways, I think is kind of the point. It's not about dividing or anything. It's about saying, showing this to someone and going, do you know what this means? And they go, I don't know. My 2-year-old daughter, okay, so this is a bizarre story. I'll get to that interview in a second. She was eating cereal and she dropped her spoon on the ground, and then there was cat hair on the ground. So her spoon that she was going to go pick up was covered in cat hair. So I said, oh, I'll go get you a new spoon. And she looked over at me and she's like, yeah. So I go and grab a spoon. I'm like, I'm Spoon Man. And then I started laughing. So I turned on the TV and put on Spoon Man by Soundgarden. And I'm like standing there going, Spoon Man. And we watched the video together. And then she looked at me and she pointed at me and goes, Spoon Man. So I became Spoon Man. And then through a random series of events, she kept seeing this on the screen because it was my user profile for the YouTube channel, because I'd changed it to this during this original IPS chat as a joke. So then she looks at my user profile, my avatar, through the YouTube thing on the screen and points at that and goes, Spoon Man. So then I make a pin, and I've made some patches, and I made some drawings of this. And now whenever she sees this, she goes, Spoon Man. So she calls this Spoon Man. And I think it's like this series of cascading inside jokes that are, they're kind of only funny to me, but the idea that these images can cause reactions, I think is really important. And I mean, if you get into the whole globe deception, it's all based on a ball. It's all based on this singular image. So using an imagery like this and putting this patch on your sleeve and having some fun with it, it's all about having fun with it. And I think that I haven't been around Flat Earth very long, but in the last 6 months, I've been focusing on having some fun with it and creating some imagery that doesn't have to specifically do with the shape of whatever Flat Earth might be, or like a globe with an X through it. Not that those are wrong, but it's something a bit detached from the actual specific issue at hand. The same way that politics aside, the same way that a cartoon frog could have represented a whole anti-social justice warrior type element of American politics is fascinating to me. I'm fascinated by these mimetic placements. And yeah, so the interview that is a crazy abrupt segue here. The interview that I did was on KMOX radio, and it was in a St. Louis AM radio station. What I didn't realize at the time was I was just replying to a Twitter feed that I went to hashtag Flat Earth, and in that feed, 12 minutes ago, someone said, hey, are there any Flat Earthers out there? We'd love to talk to you. Please call this number. So I went, called the number. I thought it might just be like a small town newspaper or something. And the guy's like, you're on the air. Let's talk about Flat Earth. So you believe in this Flat Earth thing? And I did an interview in 15 minutes. I went like full, I'm going to use our own terminology here, but full red pill all the way to the tip of the beak, all the way through Flat Earth, saying, well, there's no model that everyone agrees upon. And in fact, when you get right down to it, a lot of these NASA things that they go do, these theater things, or actually have religious elements that tie into some sort of mystery religion. And it was way too far for the audience. It was 15 minutes of just me going from, no, I think you've totally mistaken what Flat Earthers are, and here's something that you've probably never really realized. But what I didn't realize was that AM radio station was, it went to 44 states. It was syndicated all over the US. And it took me 5 days to get that audio feed, because I think they went back and I think they may have attached a guy to the end of it. who came in and said, well, Kyle's sort of right. There were a lot of astronauts that were Freemasons, but that was in the past. And there, you know, he's good. It's good that he's out trying to seek the truth. But you know what really debunks the flat Earth? Meteorites. And it's just like the whole story, the whole radio interview, I think really caught them off guard. They had to do damage control. And 5 days later, when I eventually did get them to post the real MP3 feed to their website, that little bit was tagged on. It may have been tagged on the end. I don't know if that person called in real time, but you can go to Kyle KMOX Radio to hear the interview. And it's huge. Like it's the thing is, I don't think anyone listening to that really got much out of it. It was the fact that it was so outside the normal realm. Maybe tens of thousands of people heard of it, but the fact that that little clip was on mainstream radio and now has been taken to YouTube and stuff, I think that's the point. I was doing this with One Red Paperclip. People, they're like, oh, you're trading a paperclip and you got this thing, and what do you got now? A snowmobile, cool. But when I would go and appear on television, on TV back in that day, it legitimized it in people's minds. They said, oh, this isn't just a joke. Like, you're actually doing this, or you're doing it for real. Doing it for real implies, I think, the idea that mainstream media talks about it. And unfortunate as that is, as much as we'd like to just leave mainstream media behind, if we can get hardcore real truths about our impressions of what this thing might be on mainstream media, it's going to turn a lot of heads. This is a big ship. Like, we've all been in these dinghies and we're speeding towards the shore or whatever, the ice wall, if you want to use that metaphor. There's a big ship there. And the only way you're going to get the captain of that ship to start to get up towards the bridge, or at least let people on the ship know that the captain is steering the ship towards a spinning ball versus this amazing ice wall that we should go check out. Stupid metaphors, but I really do think it's going to take a lot more appearances on mainstream media, and by real flat earthers, not these sort of like selected from old school families silver class of pop stars like Tita Tequila, B.O.B., which I don't disagree with them. I'm not saying they're fake flat earthers or any of that stuff, but why are they owning the narrative? I think the more that we get out there and appear on media and own our own version of at least our portion of the narrative, so that we can't all be painted by this picture that all flat earthers believe this, because that's absolutely not the truth. That's like saying all Christians believe this, or all Muslims believe this. It's like, there's shades of gray all over the place. And as flat earthers, what we would actually say is, well, we don't believe any of it. This is just what we think, and we can know what not to believe. It's almost like a reverse belief system when you get right down to it.
Well, I think you're wrong. I think you definitely will have affected a lot of people. It reminded me a lot of some of Mark Sargent's interviews, where the interviewer is kind of coming off the cuff in a way that's saying, I'm going to ridicule you in this interview. You could detect it. And then almost immediately it's like, what, you really, but you actually mean it? You know, you kind of caught them off guard, and people will pick up on that. You know, the fact that it's had damage control in the aftermath, I don't think it matters. I think when you're going out the way you were, people heard it. They heard it live. And that's going to have an impact on a huge number of people.
It's so fascinating. Yeah, like a Mark Sargent interview where the host is almost chuckling, like, look at this clown, this conspiracy nut. And he comes on and he's just like, no, well, that's actually not true. If you look at these things, this is the actual truth. And you can hear the host going, whoa, whoa, whoa. Well, how do you know that? And how do you know who to trust? And he's like, well, that's the whole point. I'm not trusting them. I'm actually looking for myself. And if you actually go and look, if the audience goes and looks for themselves, they're going to go, oh, he was right. Not that the host was wrong, but he revealed new information. He's actually moving things forward on this subject. And that's
or they're brave and do actually say something like, well, meteorites surely debunk flat Earth. But they wouldn't say surely. They would say meteorites debunk flat Earth. It's nonsense, you know, or some ham-handed rubbish debunking. Because your average Joe Normal or radio host DJ, he's Joe Normal as far as I'm concerned, isn't going to know the intricacies that flat Earth trolls know. You know, they're not going to know all of the finite minutiae when it comes to this subject. They're just going to know what the heliocentric mainstream tells them is the case. Okay, well,
they know the facts. They know the facts. What's the truth on this? What's the reality? And then someone provides them an easy answer and they're cool. Great. I'm going to go get a sandwich. Like, people they don't want to put the time in. And if you can go, well, no, this is totally actually a falsehood. here's what's a more probable explanation, they're going to go, okay, might be.
That's true, but you're right in terms of, unfortunately, a lot of people won't believe it until they see it on mainstream TV. Once it reaches that point, and I think it can, because as I said earlier on in the show, I think we're dealing with systems that are in place and there's no man behind the curtain actually standing watching. There's been lots of men behind the curtains that have made these systems possible, but it means that there's a good chance we can actually, or like you did, get yourself onto mainstream media, get the ear of a huge number of people, because we can, there's the element of surprise. It's not like a lot of the other conspiracies that are being censored. We're not. I genuinely don't think we are. Before we round out, can you give us a full plug to your channel and anywhere else you want to direct anybody who may watch this Google Plus stream?
I will, and I was going to mention the a media guy who was sort of anti-flat Earth at the beginning, who's sort of changed more to a neutral, open-minded stance. Is a dude named Mark Devlin. He has a podcast called Good Vibrations, and he's entertaining the idea in a really neutral way. I just want to give him a plug because I think he's one of these guys that I did hear initially do the anti-Mark Sargent type thing, and he's kind of come full circle and gone, there's more to this. So minds can change quite quickly. But yeah, my stuff is the YouTube channel is Kyle MacMac2, KyleMacMac2. I did have a Kyle MacMac original, and it got taken down like 10 years ago. So I've had YouTube channels get taken down. At One Red Paperclip, ONERED Paperclip on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, I think, as like Fepe the Penguin. Just Google Kyle MacDonald Red Paperclip. You'll find all my stuff. And the website for the Red Paperclip story is oneredpaperclip.com.
Good stuff. Well, I'm going to say a massive, huge thank you, Kyle, for doing Flat Earth United. It's been a real pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks. I'm really, it's kind of, I'm a bit in disbelief that I'm on this show because I started watching it like 6 months ago. So it's great to be here.
It's testament to how good your content is. I mean, I hope you can pick up a few subscribers. Don't get the big lull afterwards if you don't. It's not that big a show, believe me. But yes, I will also say a massive thank you to the audience who have joined us. If you want to continue to watch Kyle and I chat, hopefully for a little bit afterwards, click on the link to the OBS feed in the info box below this video. If you're new to this channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon to keep up to date with videos from Nathan Oakley 1980. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.